Hey, everybody. I wasn't paying quite as much attention to the clock as I should have been. How's it going, Andy?
I'm good, John. How are you?
Doing good, man. It's nice and quieter in my house. I have more of the internet to myself. My kids started school on Tuesday. So, two out of the three are back at school. I've got my 3-year-old still, but I think he might still be asleep, which it's getting kind of late for that, but we'll see if he comes tearing in here.
Yeah, I've
You have kids in
actually
school age?
I got both of the kids at home. They're actually out of school,
Okay.
so I got a soon-to-be 4-year-old, and then I got a 5-month-old.
Okay.
They're both
Yeah.
home. Wife's taking care of them today, and then I get dad duty this afternoon. So
Yeah.
going to be playing with the boys whenever we wrap up here in a few hours. So looking forward to
Cool.
some one-on-one
Nice.
time with the guys.
That's good. Yeah, it's school starting up this season and it's different. We're a little bit nervous, Me and my wife are
Mm.
vaccinated, but kids can't get vaccinated yet and we're just hoping they don't get it, So we'll see how it
I
goes.
can sympathize with that.
Yeah, it's just you be careful for, a year and a half and then they might get sick anyway the first week. There's no virtual option in my area, so so everybody watching, we looks like we got a few viewers right now. Let us know in the chat where you're from, where you're tuning in. We've got the chat going. We'll show you up on screen, and this is going to be interactive. We're live right now, so we want questions. As you have questions come up, um, we've got a topic today. We're going to talk about channel-based meetings, which Andy is much more of an expert in than I am. I attend a lot of channel meetings, especially ones that are hosted by Microsoft. So I'm a guest in a lot of Microsoft Teams on their tenant. So I know what it looks like as like a user, but to be honest, my organization internally, I don't think we've really adopted channel meetings quite as much. When I look at like our usage statistics of like meetings versus or channel based versus other types of chats, we've got, I don't know if this is the way it is with you, Andy, but I'd say it's about 10 to 1, like 10 times the like one-on-one chats or small group chats for every like one channel chat. Like people use Teams. We got like 20,000 Teams in our environment, but my goodness, we're doing millions of chat conversations. And I think it's that way for like what type of meetings people do. What's it like in your world?
It definitely depends on the type of meeting, but the reason that I learned a lot about channel meetings and all the nuances is because we have a organizational retention policy related to chat. So any
Mm,
chat and conversation related to a meeting is actually deleted after 30 days per company policy. And so getting back to some of that information, especially for reoccurring meetings within various business units, was very difficult for us. And so the within the organization that I primarily work with, it's a healthcare organization. We have an internal team that supports communication and collaboration technologies. Teams and SharePoint fall underneath that. And our
mhm,
team is small, but we meet regularly and we continue and pick up conversations from where we left off. So working in private meetings wasn't working for us because we were losing some of that history in that conversation.
mm,
So we actually pivoted to channel meetings and set those up on a recurring basis. And then we were able to continue to have that pre, during, and post conversation experience that Teams is built around. And in addition, as somebody new
mhm,
onboarded to the team, they could very quickly get caught up with the conversation because it was actually in that channel. And then we started kind of pushing this out to some of our additional user base. And private meetings still are the primary driver of communication within this organization, but channel meetings are gaining steam. As far as the actual metrics around that, I'd have to go into some reporting around that to be able to know if we're doing like a 10 to 1 ratio. But we're finding more value in channel meetings versus the private meetings. And then, as
mhm,
we're going to talk about here today, there are a number of changes that are happening as it relates to team meeting recordings, shifting off of Stream to the new Stream and OneDrive and SharePoint. but also working with some of the retention policies, the automatic retention policies that Microsoft's rolling out for Teams meeting recordings. And so some things like that are causing us to rethink our governance around this whole scenario. So really had to do a deep dive to really understand all the things related to channel meetings. And even though I've been using them for a few years, there's little nuances here and there that some of our friends and colleagues might talk about, but I thought it would be a good idea if we could have a deep dive into it and kind of put all this into one place, one spot, one conversation, so people can come and ask us some live questions around it, but also be able to share some of the insight from these lessons learned over the last couple of years of working with us.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm pumped. I think it's going to be a really fun time. I've got demos set up as well, and I think I'm going to learn quite a bit from your experience. So
we have it on video. I don't think I've ever heard anybody say that I am pumped and I'm going to have a fun time learning about channel meetings. I don't know if that's ever been uttered in a sentence before.
I'm always looking for something to try to get other people to do, and be like, hey, channel meetings are great for these reasons. Hopefully I'll have some more ammo. So, Living in List says he hates when he's late. You're not late. We're just getting started. We're going to jump right in here. And I think to start out, I know academically, the differences between channel meetings and normal scheduled meetings. This is a slide that I think is going to help us kind of work our way through the differences between channel meetings and other types of meetings. This is from a class that I've developed. We call it Modern Meeting Basics internally at Cerner. And hopefully you guys can feel free to take this. It's something I created to kind of give me a breakdown of what's what between channel-based versus scheduled versus what happens, what's the difference between a webinar and a live event. And I think that's going to kind of guide, especially as we start talking about recordings and how things are scheduled. Where's that recording land? This will hopefully be a helpful chart for you guys to kind of refer back to. What do you think, Andy? You want to start out with scheduling meetings in different ways and kind of talk about that?
Yeah, let's start with the creation process and do a comparison actually between the two. So when you create a meeting, what are you creating it from and what are your options going to be? And then we can go into how scheduling actually applies into that. And then we can continue to kind of deep dive from there. So just from a meeting creation standpoint, most users are creating private meetings. So that's based around chat. You can run it from chat. You can go to your calendar and you can schedule it inside of Teams. You can even schedule these from Outlook. But most meeting types that we work with are actually private meetings. And private meetings are invite only. You're part of that group of people that have been invited to that meeting. That's the core meeting type. It was only recently that we got the webinar option. And then we've had live events, but in my experience, live events, that's typically been for something that's more of a production process, a town hall.
Planning around it. Yeah,
exactly. We tried live events for webinars for a while, and just the overhead is a little high. And there were some situations where doing virtual training in organization, I'm running solo. And for me to run a live event solo, I needed 2 user accounts. I needed one to be the organizer and moderator, and then I needed one for me to be the presenter and do everything I needed to do. So I was having to work with 2 separate computers to make that happen. And, it was just a lot of overhead versus if you do a normal Teams meeting, you can deliver, that experience as a single presenter and even webinars to a certain extent. But I think most meeting types are actually built around private meetings, and that's built around that chat experience. So to your slide, it supports the option to meet now, an ad hoc meeting, but you can also schedule those. And then as far as the tools are concerned, and we can walk through and demo this for anybody who's joining in, when you work with a private meeting, you can schedule that, or you can start it ad hoc in Teams in a number of places, but you can also schedule it and work with it from Outlook if that's your preferred scheduling tool. And so they're both going to be supported.
Yeah. So I've got a second slide that we've got here is Outlook versus Teams for scheduling. And as Andy said, when you've got a normal private meeting that you've been scheduling since like, the late 90s, early 2000s in Outlook. Outlook's kind of the normal place for doing that. As we get into channel-based meetings, we have the ability to add a channel if you're scheduling the meeting in the Teams application. And then, you have the other special sauce that Teams kind of brings to that scheduling experience, like being able to add applications right after you schedule the meeting. You can add in the polls app, or soon we'll be able to do the moderated Q&A. That's going to be an application that you add. But add scheduling time in Teams, you're able to add a channel. And now everybody, by being a member of the channel, whether they're an internal member or even a guest, they'll be invited to the meeting. They have access to attend that particular meeting. And some of the special things about Outlook, though, why you might want to do a private meeting over a channel-based meeting, is just you have the ability to do a little bit more advanced stuff, like looking into people's calendars with the room finder, being able to filter capabilities of the room if your organization has set that up. We just did that with our new campus, Innovations 2048. We're able to now in Room Finder, I can pick, if I'm using Outlook, I can pick, I need a room with 8 people. It needs to have a video camera capability. It needs to be MTR enabled. And then I can filter down what rooms are available. Well, we have a scheduling assistant, but we don't have like the proper room finder yet on the Teams side. Also the ability to do like find time. We can certainly demo how find time works, but you can send a meeting poll. If you don't know the time, but the audience, you can just ask them when they want to meet, and you can let people vote. So switching over here to an actual demo, Andy, as you were talking about, you can make an ad hoc meeting, whether it's in a channel or if it's in a chat conversation. So like I've got Pradeep here. Megan is chatting with Pradeep. She can certainly do an ad hoc video call with him. But over here under the Teams area, if I switch over to Teams, oh my gosh, this is where it like dies again on me. If I switch over to Teams in the general channel, that meeting is a proper meet button. So whenever we start a meeting in here, it's going to put a banner in the channel letting everybody know, hey, we're meeting in here, come on by, because everybody is welcome in a channel meeting if you're a member of the team, obviously.
Yeah, and that's the distinction. Like when you're in chat, it's invite only. It's the people that are the participants in the chat, versus if you're in the channel, it's anybody who has access to the channel. So that's going to come from the owners and the members of the larger team. And so if it's in the channel, anybody could join in if they happen to see that the meeting's actually going on. And there's some nuances to that we'll talk about in a few minutes.
Yeah, and if we're doing Meet now, you do have the ability, it'll just say like meeting in general as kind of the title, but you can change that, so if this is just an ad hoc, hey, let's do a quick sync with the team, I want to get you guys all in and chat, we can rename it Quick Sync. Megan's joining the meeting now, and then I can go ahead and minimize that because I want to show you what happens in Teams for everybody else. It says like, hey, do you want to invite people? Because she might sit here for a while by herself until people realize that a meeting has started. But inside of Teams, all the other members will see now that there's this banner that shows up in the general channel. And it's the name of the meeting. We see how long it's been going on. And this is kind of a helpful thing for me. I noticed this like in the calendar as well. You can kind of like peek into the meeting. And if it's like, it's just Megan in there, and I'm not sure that I really want to have like a one-on-one awkward conversation with Megan. Let's wait till a couple more people pop in. If you kind of snoop in and look at this banner, it will tell you who's in the meeting currently. So you can decide whether or not, you want to hop in because there's enough people to not be, weird. I'm socially awkward, so I benefit from that. Another thing that's helpful in Microsoft Teams is when there's a channel-based meeting going on. I'm in one channel. It's the Microsoft Tap channel. There's like 200 channels in that thing. So it's this huge scrolling list, and you may not know, like you may know that there's a channel meeting going on, but you don't know which channel it's in. If you scroll through the list on the left-hand side, everything with an active meeting going on in that channel shows this little camera icon right now. Andy, I got your annotation tool, boom,
Yeah.
there's an arrow. The little the little camera icon shows up. So if you've got a ton of teams with a ton of channels in them, you can scroll through and find the one where there's a meeting. Click on it, you'll see that little banner. Okay, it's just Megan in there, so maybe I want to wait a little while. But those are little tips that I use to kind of hop into a meeting or decide to wait like a little bit when just a random meeting pops up.
In those teams with a large number of teams, knowing that there's actually one of these meetings in progress can be a little overwhelming. We'll talk about some tips and tricks around this to like make sure that you're in the know of like what meetings are actually in progress, what meetings are going on. But when I do training, one of the things that I point out to people is like the main way that you're going to know something's happening in the channel is to take a look at the team's navigation along the left-hand side there. And you'll see the name of the channel. And then off to the right, you got the little video icon. And that indicates that there's activity related to a meeting actually happening there. The little trick that you just showed how to see who's actually in attendance to that's actually really helpful. But there's a couple other things that users can do along with that particular meeting to make things kind of important to them or to get some more details around what's actually happening before they really commit into that meeting. For example, like, you get the join option inside of there. But before that even goes on, like with other meetings, like you can view some of the details conversation before you actually join in. So like you got, that quick sync going on, but you did a test meeting up above. Joanna actually has some going on. So like you can see there's active conversation happening related to that meeting. So you can expand, you can reply, you can ask a question, and you're not even in the meeting. Like you just see like some of the comments and things that are actually coming through before you commit to it.
Yeah, so there's a good opportunity that whenever something is pre-scheduled in a channel, you can add to the chat. So you can start the chat early. You can do this in a regular meeting as well. It's just in the chat area. It might get buried. But when it's organized around a channel, you start that chat conversation. This is a good opportunity to add the agenda, let other people contribute to it. Hey, I think we should talk about this or that. That's how things work today. Very soon, I think this is scheduled for September. Very soon, we're going to have the ability to add these fluid components. So if you haven't seen the announcements around fluid, this is pretty exciting because when you make a meeting collaborative, you have an agenda. You will have an agenda that is live and collaborative by multiple people. So they'll be able to add things to the list ad hoc, and it'll be a single list experience instead of like just adding a chat. I think we should talk about this. And then Alex says, I think we should talk about this other topic. Everybody's equal whenever there's like a true collaborative agenda. That's going to be the fluid component. So that might be a good live stream in the future, Andy, is to start talking about those whenever they roll out, hopefully in September. But yeah, that's really helpful to have the chat available.
And it gives you pre, during, and post. So you can see it before the meeting starts. You can update it live while you're actually in the meeting. And then you can go back and you can review it after the fact. And that's really helpful if you want to do something in the meeting and you want to carry over maybe a list of things that need to be checked off before, the next meeting, a series of things that we need prior to actually the meeting beginning. We can put it in there. And then anybody who's a part of that team would actually be able to view and contribute to that conversation pre, during, and post.
Yeah. Now we've got this meeting. Joanna created it. It's called planogram testing. It's way in the past. Just ignore that it's April 2021. We'll pretend it's in September. A helpful thing you can do if like you see these banners and something's been scheduled in the channel and you're interested in it, it could be sent out to everybody in the channel and it gets added to their calendar just like a normal meeting. That's how like my Microsoft Tap meetings are. They get sent to us as a team and then it's added to my calendar and I show up. If you see this though, and it's not been mailed out to everybody, they can still click on this banner and we hop in to the meeting details. And once this loads up, I'm not seeing it probably because it occurred in the past. But one thing that's nice about a channel-based meeting when you get into the details is there's a button up near the top where you can add it to your calendar.
Yep.
I'll create a new one here and we can see what that button looks like. But I've found that really helpful as well, Andy.
Yeah. And that's going to be for people that are internal to the organization to be able to add it to the calendar, but it does show up in the top left-hand corner. So if it is something that is important and you want to make sure you have that calendar invite, it'll show up in that top left-hand corner, and you can make sure that you get it on the calendar that you frequently use.
Yeah. So if like we make one here that's like planogram Q3, we can add required attendees here. It's already in the retail general channel because I clicked schedule a meeting from the channel listing. And we'll just go ahead and send this out. I'm going to put this for like September.
So as you're doing this is a good segue to talk about the difference between an ad hoc and a scheduled meeting. An ad hoc is like what John just did a moment ago, meet now. And anybody who's a member of the team, if they're online, they can join. If they're not, they might get a notification, depending on their channel notifications, that a meeting has actually started. But when you're scheduling the meeting, like John was just doing, there is that participants field there, and you have required and optional attendees or participants. Those people are going to get an email notification that the meeting is in progress, or the meeting scheduled rather. The rest of the team, though, they don't receive a notification around that unless they have channel notifications set up. So they're not going to get an email invite to that meeting. They're not going to have it show up in their calendar. So the names that go in there, they get that. But anybody else, it's just there's a manual effort for them to get the notification and the update related to that meeting.
That's a question I have, Andy. Is there, if I go in and edit this, you said like if you add people to the optional and required, that's going to notify them, right? That's going to send it just like a normal, like
they get the calendar invite. Yeah.
Can you like @reply the channel or anything to like add the whole channel to this meeting?
So nuances with that. You can add people, internal or external to the organization, depending on your guest settings. You can use like security groups or distribution lists if those are in your global address book. And you can reference Microsoft 365 groups. And the groups is a feature that's a little bit newer. It wasn't always there, but it's now there. You can reference a Microsoft 365 group. But as of today, as of testing, you cannot reference the channel and you cannot reference the team for the participants list. However, if you build your team a certain way, if you start with an Office 365 group and then you convert that to a team, teamify it, that group can then be mentioned here and you can invite the entire group, and that'll actually show up provided the group's available in the global address list. And we can as an owner, we can prevent that from happening, and as an admin, we can remove people from that. But if you groupify then teamify, you get it. But otherwise, no, you can't mention the reference the channel or the team when you're creating the invite.
Showing up then is because they're in the gal. Yeah, it's like I'm doing like sales, and that does pop up, but that would also pop up if I were scheduling an Outlook because it's in the global address list. You can invite it. That is a security group, you know? Yeah. Okay. Well, that's good to know. Yeah. Cause I can find retail, but I can't find retail a sub channel, you know? So you're sending it to everybody in the team if you do it that way. That's really helpful to know.
Now here's an interesting little nugget. So like I can't say like mention the name of the team or mention the name of the channel, but if you close this and you go back to the message, so you scheduled it and it's going to show up in the channel in just a second. Yeah. So like we're going back here. So if you go here and you reply, you can mention the team or mention the channel and say, hey, there's a meeting scheduled coming up. And so then you can create the invite and then mention the whole team. And it just depends on
that. You can make it high importance. You can make it like a proper announcement for the channel, all that. You have all those capabilities of a channel message.
Exactly. Yeah, so that's just a little nuance, little trick to be able to get people to
give them a heads up.
To give them a heads up, to give them some kind of notification around that.
Yeah. So we've got this channel meeting scheduled. if we go over here, like we were talking about, a guest, what does it look like for the guest? So this is, I invited my own corporate account. You see like my face in the upper corner. As a guest, when I go here and I open up this meeting, because like, oh, this looks like a great meeting, I'm not able to get into the details. Like you don't have that add to calendar functionality, but we've got Alex. I think Alex is in this team. If I open up his team's window, then we go into teams here. Let's see if he's in the retail. Yeah, so he's in retail. He sees that he was notified. He's got a high importance with the notification. He's able to jump in because he's part of Contoso. He's in the same company, and he can see the meeting details here. If we like click on it, see those details, and he should hopefully live demo. He should have a button up here. Yeah, he can add it to his calendar. It hasn't been pushed to his calendar because we didn't add everybody in the team or Alex individually as a required participant. So he just gets notified via an @reply in the chat. He can click add to calendar, and now it's going to, add it to his Outlook calendar. He has now accepted that particular meeting. He's RSVP'd to it.
Well, let's keep in mind though, that's a manual effort on Alex's part. So
Yeah.
that's something we need to communicate. Like if we're going to do a meeting here, or, reoccurring meeting or whatever, if you want to make sure it's on that calendar and it's a channel meeting, you're going to have to manually do these two steps: navigate to the channel, go to the meeting details, and then add to your calendar, and then it'll show up moving forward.
It kind of goes to like the culture of your team, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if this is an example internally, like if this is an organizational team, like it's my team called Enterprise Mobility, probably if my manager, schedules a meeting, he needs to push it to everybody's calendar. Like you're expected to show up when the boss, makes a meeting. But we have a team called Engineering Culture, and they have, trivia night or something like that they host in a channel. They actually do this. They wouldn't want necessarily to put the entire engineering culture, because it's like thousands of people. They don't want to put that in the required field. Instead, they should schedule the channel meeting, then advertise it and say, hey, add it to your calendar. Here's how you add it to your calendar, @reply, and, mention people in teams. But in some groups, it might feel like you're crossing a boundary to shove trivia night onto their calendar by inviting them as a required attendee, right?
Right.
So that's just kind of like one of those scenarios where you got to pick your situation. Like, are people expected to show up, or do I want them to show up because it's a culture thing?
Exactly. The business case around the meeting is going to be a big driver of whether you want to push the meeting onto to the users versus allow them to decide whether to join into it or not. I kind of discovered the nuances of this particular scenario, what we're talking about with like who gets the invite and the calendar notifications, because we had a situation where we had a team that does education around health and safety within this healthcare organization, but they host it in a team, a Microsoft team, but they actually have people from all across the organization that participate in these monthly meetings. So the guest list is essentially changing every single month. As people come and go and roles change, they have a new set of people that have to be involved in this or need to be involved in this every month. And sending out an email or keeping and managing an email list of 400 plus people every single month that wasn't going to work for them. Additionally, copying and pasting those names in, that wasn't going to work. We couldn't create a security group around this because roles change too much. So the process that we decided on was we'll create a team around it, but we're going to create it as a group first. So we get that Microsoft 365 group to mention to the calendar invite. And then we built the team on top of that, teamified it. And then we just added the group to the invite. So now the business case is when people onboard or assume this new role within their department and they need to sit in on this monthly meeting, they join the team. And by joining the team, now the invites actually come to them, and they don't have to do the manual process and navigate to the team, navigate to the meeting, go to the details, and then schedule. but we had to teamify or groupify before we could get into that process.
Before you did things.
Yeah.
And the other way around, you could run a PowerShell to add it to the global address list, and then it would show up too.
But if you don't have access
good to know.
The admin capabilities,
run PowerShell,
that's a little hard.
We got one really good question here from Christoph. That's, can I edit a weekly channel meeting, like adding Q&A whenever like the moderated Q&A comes out? I think that's a good time. This is a good opportunity. Let's schedule a meeting using the calendar in Teams, show how to add a channel, and then we'll see, are we able to add meeting apps to this? Spoiler alert, you can't add meeting apps to channel-based meetings, but we'll show that here in a second. So to answer Chris's question, let's go over here to the calendar. And we'll create a new meeting. So whether you're going to do a private meeting or a channel-based meeting, you can do it from the calendar in Microsoft Teams. So we can call this, trivia night. I think that's a great example. We want to make it recurring. So we're going to have this thing recur weekly. Good grief. I don't think I would want to run a trivia day every Friday. I'm not social enough for that. But whenever we want to add a channel, you can add a channel here just below the recurrence, and you see a list of your channels. You don't have to remember the name of it. We're going to do it in retail, in general. And then now we've added a channel, but we haven't added required attendees. We're not going to shove it out to everybody. And then something that's new in Microsoft Teams, if I switch back over to my slide, something that's new is we actually have RSVP options and forwarding controls in Teams now. So if I get back to the right window. So this is pretty cool. I can not request responses if I don't want to get a whole bunch of RSVPs back. And I can also prevent forwarding from the Teams application on the calendar. And then registration, that's webinars. We talked about that a couple streams ago. But let's go ahead and get this on the books. It's going to happen every Friday at 11 o'clock. We're going to have trivia day and send that out. And then we'll look at the meeting details here. So this gets created. It's spinning up the Microsoft Teams conference bridge and all of that type of stuff. So it takes, a few seconds to generate the meeting ID and all that cool stuff. My Teams is kind of slow anyway right now. It's something, man, like in all my testing, it all works out great. And then when I actually go live and I'm sending data to YouTube, it like Teams just this VM just wants to crawl,
If we edit this in post, this is where we have a jump cut.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. The old Camtasia add clip speed where you can speed things up. But we'll let that get created here. And if I go back into Teams, it's probably already in the channel as well. So in general, Megan made this meeting. It's called Trivia Night. And this one, see how this one has a date and time. It's happening on Thursday. This one indicates that it's a reoccurring. So it's happening over and over again. And if we jump into the meeting details here, hopefully this will load up from this direction. There we go. We can edit this with a recurrence on it. We're able to change the details of it or add a location or something like that. The downside, or one of the limitations of a channel-based meeting, though, is you don't see the plus sign up here at the top next to scheduling assistant. And that's because, unfortunately, one of the limitations of a channel-based meeting is you can't add meeting apps to it. So if we go to this guy right here, meeting apps are available if you did like a Meet Now and you went to the chat, you'd see the plus and you could add tabs to it. It's also available in scheduled meetings that are just private scheduled meetings, but a channel-based meeting doesn't have app capabilities. What I think is going to happen is moderated Q&A is coming soon in September. It's not available yet, so we can't say definitively, but moderated Q&A, we saw a YouTube video. Microsoft put out a public YouTube video showing how to add Q&A. You actually are going to add Q&A as a meeting app, which I personally like. I like the idea of start with a meeting and then bolt on what you need, kind of like building the perfect Lego brick creation. So I like the idea of adding an app, but because it's an app, I would suspect that we won't be able to do moderated Q&A in a channel-based meeting. I'm pretty confident about that, but I could always be proven wrong next month when it actually hits GA. So hopefully that answers your question, Christoph, about Q&A. No, specifically you can't, but you can edit a recurring meeting that's based out of a channel, no problem.
There is
If you need to
one
add
more
details
thing
or something.
about editing. Can we go back to the
Yeah, go ahead,
details
man.
screen? So when you edit the channel meeting, the one other
Mhm.
thing you can't do is you can't change the channel. So for example, if you scheduled it in the
Oh,
wrong
yeah, grayed
channel,
out.
it's you can't change the channel once you create one of these. So you can delete it and then you can recreate it, put it in the appropriate channel. But once you lock it into a channel, it's there. That's where it's actually going to show up, is in that channel moving forward.
Okay, that's good to know. One other thing I'm seeing from missing from here is in Outlook, you're able to toggle a switch somewhere up here where it's like, I'm going to make changes to this one, or I'm going to make changes to the series. This looks like it's probably just going to change the entire series. If I were to add random text here and send an update, it looks like I'm not able to just change the one recurrence of it or the one instance of it. I wonder if I could do that from Outlook or from the calendar in Microsoft Teams. Have you run into that before? Where you need to change like, hey, here's the agenda for this one meeting in a monthly occurrence.
I think I actually edited a single occurrence. Yeah, there you go. I was going to say, I
when
feel like I did
went
that
from
recently.
the channel, so when I went from the channel and I went to meeting details, I was looking at the series. I think. Actually, let's verify that. So this is the meeting that I just scheduled, and I went and added a bunch of gibberish into the description. Let's go forward a week. There's trivia night. If I open up that, I can edit the occurrence or the series. Let's edit just the occurrence and see if that gibberish is in the description. Yes. So when I went from the channel, piped into the meeting details, when I made an edit there, it edits the series, the whole thing. But if you go from the calendar and you select like the instance, you can hit edit. You can decide whether you want to edit just that one or if you want to edit the whole series. So, I learned something just now. My mind's blown.
Figuring out
there's an interesting quirk.
Yeah, figuring out the back and forth here, like where do I go to adjust this? Where do I go to adjust that? It takes a little. It takes a little to get accustomed to it. Like going back into the channel, as you mentioned, like you're making changes essentially to the series. But if you go to your calendar, you can drill down to just that one single event, and you can make the adjustment there. There was another question in the chat, and this actually leads into where we were kind of outlining moving through. So you created a reoccurring meeting every Friday in there. Now we've talked about the differences between editing an individual item in the series and the larger series. So Pat had a question in the chat. You see that, the orphan channel meetings?
Yeah. Let me throw that on screen here.
So orphan channel meetings. Let's break that down just a little bit. What happens if you schedule a reoccurring meeting and somebody leaves the team or leaves the organization, and you've got a reoccurring meeting in there? Does it continue, and how do you clean it up? So the short answer is yes. If somebody creates a reoccurring meeting in a team and they leave the team or the organization, the meeting's still going to run. It's still going to be inside of that that calendar. So you're going to have to go back and you're actually going to have to clean it up. Owners of the team, they can go back and they can make those changes and they can adjust it, and they can remove it or edit however they need. But I want to take that and I want to point out, if you do a private meeting, a group meeting, and you put it on a reoccurring schedule and it runs, the manager of that person can actually go in and delete that reoccurring schedule, that reoccurring meeting invite that was sent out there. But in a channel meeting, it's reoccurring because Teams is set for evolution as people come and go. So the other participants in that team channel should be able to go in and make the adjustments there.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. We got Living in List says that they're doing down things. So they're, to get calendaring with teams with their P2 licenses. Can't. Yeah, we went that direction. We're E5 now, moving up from E3 and everything with my
You're part of the
organization.
8% club.
So yeah, of orgs that have E5, it's pretty nice. So
Yeah.
we just adjusted in our chair at the same time. Did you notice that? Did you guys catch that? Both of us like raised up and sat down at the exact same time. That was awesome.
It would be really interesting if you're also using the Herman Miller Arion chair.
No, mine's like, I got this like $130 thing at Staples, and it's not comfortable. Like my back is killing me all the time. I got to get something nicer.
I paid $150 for my my Herman Miller. Got it gently used. Found it from a friend of mine. Found it from an office sale. The whole office like shut down, and they put everything on a fire sale. And so he managed to get a used one for me. It's been an amazing investment, especially for $150, considering what these things retail for.
Yeah, that's awesome. I should look at that. I mean, there's all kinds of offices probably selling things off right now, especially. Yep. So on the next topic, we got like, scheduling and the location, how some of the nuances of scheduling when it comes to Teams-based meetings. The big one to take away is like, you got to use the Teams calendar or the Teams app if you're going to do a channel-based meeting, because in Outlook, you're not going to add a channel to an Outlook scheduled meeting.
So yeah, that's a big takeaway. You cannot schedule a channel meeting in Outlook, but there's a workaround for that.
Oh yeah, what do you got?
So there is a workaround for scheduling a channel meeting in Outlook. So if we go back to go back to your meeting details screen.
Okay.
All right. So we got the meeting here. This was scheduled in Teams. So let's go into the actual details. So let's expand this.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. So when this is created in Teams, when the meeting is created in Teams, in the body down below, it actually adds the Teams meeting information. You get the join information, you get the calling information. All of that is actually added to the Teams meeting invite in Teams. So what you can do is take that and you can go over to Outlook and you can create an event in Outlook, and you can add that information into the Outlook calendar or the Outlook event. And then you can schedule, you can use that to schedule an Outlook, but that's a workaround, and there's nuances to this. So let's schedule one of these.
Yeah,
so we can see
there's
that.
A bunch of nuances to that. Oh, one thing, people who are watching from Cerner, don't do that unless you're going to go in, and Andy might be getting here too. Don't do that unless you're going to go in and take out that this is an online meeting, because our environment, now all meetings are online. That was like the name of the feature. So it's going to add conflicting Teams meeting info, and then you're going to get an error saying there's already a Teams meeting. This doesn't match. So that's the one nuance I know of. Good grief. We have people do that all the time. It's their workaround to try to do it from like a shared calendar and create a Teams meeting that way. And then they're like, why doesn't it have a dial-in info? Well, it's because we don't license our shared calendars with full E5 licensing, because that's expensive. So you want me to create a new meeting here?
You can do a new meeting.
Okay. Okay. There we go. Give it a real interesting name there. So we're talking paste that in, and we've got the Teams meeting info for the channel-based meeting that got created.
But what we're not going to do is we're not going to schedule an online meeting in here. We're just copying the information from the already scheduled channel meeting, and now we're using Outlook to be able to create a communication around that. And so some of the benefits that you'll get here is that with Outlook, I can post on a shared calendar So I could create an event on a shared calendar, and it could show up there, and people that are subscribed to that calendar could see the meeting information inside of there. Also, if I am somebody who is maybe supporting somebody on the executive team, so I'm posting things on their calendar on their behalf, I could create a channel meeting, and then here I could post it onto that calendar for that person delegate, for that person. And I can take advantage of also my local contacts list. So like the global address book is available in Teams if I need to schedule a person or a security group or a Microsoft 365 group. But in my Outlook, I might have a private set of contacts that I work with that, maybe outside of that global address book. I would have full access to that here in Outlook, but I'm not going to have that inside of Teams. There's just no mapping of the full Outlook contacts list that you've created in Teams yet. So those are some of the benefits that I get. But now, as you're showing here, we can paste in the Teams meeting channel information as part of this and create that and push it out on the calendar. But if you have the default, like you're saying, where every event is automatically scheduled as an online meeting, you might have two separate sets of meeting invites that happen there. One's going to be a private meeting, and the other's going to be a channel meeting. You're going to have people going to two separate locations.
You split your audience. We've had a lot of that feedback from users like, oh my gosh, like there was another meeting. It's like, yeah, because it got created. Now Outlook, I think if I hit send, at least in our environment, it does not let you do that. It gives you an error saying there's a duplicate meeting, but we've had people get confused about like, well, no, I pasted it in. It's like, well, it's because it's trying to make an online meeting.
Yeah.
And what we have to instruct users to do, I don't really want to show my Cerner email, but what we have to instruct users to do is to go into their Teams plugin, and they click next to it. There's like a button for don't make this an online meeting. If they click that, then it doesn't have that error message for a duplicate meeting. This environment apparently isn't configured that way, but yeah,
I just want to emphasize that
even if you delete it out, that's another thing is if I go and I deleted that section out and I go hit send, here's the problem we run into. People will get the calendar notification from Outlook 15 minutes early, and it's going to be real helpful, and it's going to have a join online button. That join online, that is not this meeting. That is the meeting details you just deleted, and they're still going to end up in this like no man's land other meeting that you didn't even know existed because you thought you got rid of the meeting. The join button does not take you to the channel meeting, so buyer beware. It's a scary thing to do.
Yeah. And just to make sure we're clear, this is a workaround. I don't recommend this unless you are, you've tested this and you know what you're doing. I wouldn't want every end user out there to do this. This is just showing you that I cannot schedule a channel meeting from Outlook, but if I copy and paste that meeting detail information, I can use it, but depending on the settings,
you can do it. Could be some, use your contacts. Yeah.
We were so busy asking ourselves whether we could, we forgot to ask ourselves if we should.
Yeah. The engineers on my team are going to see this and be like, oh my God, we're going to get so many SRs about people pasting in the Teams details.
We don't advertise this internally. If a situation comes up where we need to do something like this, we'll do it for the user. We'll handle all of the as a IT support team, we'll handle this for the user and we'll set it up. But we don't recommend that our end users take on themselves to actually go through this.
Yeah, cool. But hey, it's a workaround. It works. So. I think the next thing past scheduling is to talk about recording, because recording is pretty different when it comes to even like what it was a year ago, right? So we've already made one change to recordings. Microsoft has, where recordings are no longer in Microsoft Stream. The recording for a Teams meeting is in OneDrive, and it's in the OneDrive account. I'm talking like regular private scheduled meeting. if I've got just a meeting scheduled with 3 people and I click record, that's going to be scheduled, or that's going to be saved to my OneDrive in a folder called recordings. If Andy was in the meeting and he pressed record, it'd be in his OneDrive. It's automatically shared with the people who are in the same org who were invited to the meeting, but it's like physically stored with Andy. Now, what about a channel-based meeting? It's a little bit different because when you have a Teams channel in a Microsoft team, there's SharePoint involved. We have this nice folder structure pre-created that comes along with creating a team, where the files are organized into a SharePoint document library. Well, when you go to hit record in a channel-based meeting, it's going to be smart enough to put it in that folder structure because, hey, SharePoint already exists. We're going to have a recording folder for that channel. We'll put it in there. And then now everybody in the team can get to the recording without having to worry about permissions and stuff. So that's a really handy nuance whenever it comes to recording. You want to show that, Andy?
Why don't you walk through it since you've already got the screen share up? So let's actually, I'm in your tenant as a guest, so I'm not going to have access to that, which is something else we'll cover as we're going through it. But like you go into the meeting and we'll record and we'll walk through from there.
Yeah. So we're going to start this trivia night instance, and I want to start recording. We'll see what happens. What does it look like in the Teams client whenever something is being recorded? And also, like, where does it go after? So Megan's in this meeting. Pretend that there's like 30 other people in and we're having a great trivia night. She's going to start recording the meeting because, time zones exist and not everybody can attend everything at the same time. So it's always best to just go ahead and record. She's recording the meeting. Now, what's cool is, or something that's helpful, is if I go to Teams, I use this all the time whenever I'm like in like a tap meeting or something. And I've got a lot of conflicts, right? I've got like 3 meetings that are scheduled at the same time. If I'm trying to figure out which one to attend, you can scroll through and see like, okay, general is meeting because there's, I'm going to annotate. General is meeting because there's a camera right there. But I have a conflict. If I look at the banner, I can see that red dot means it's being recorded right now. I don't have to get into the meeting to see if it's being recorded. I know that I'm going to be able to watch that later on. It also, posts in the chat, but say that chat's active and this thing gets pushed up into the thread. I can look at a glance, know that that's being recorded, and think like, okay, I'll go to the other meeting then and I'll catch up on this one later. So if we go back in here, that's enough recording. We're going to stop recording now. And then we'll see at the bottom, it'll say that the recording has ended here in a second. So it has stopped. It's saving. It's funny. It says saving to OneDrive because it's not. It's saving to SharePoint. Mm-hmm. But now the recording dot went away up here next to the timestamp. We're going to leave this meeting. And it was a 5-star quality meeting. I always hit 5 stars. So that processed really fast. That 1-minute meeting is already processed, ready to go. Now, as an end user, I can just go to the channel and click on it and watch it. 90% of the time, I'm watching it off of the thumbnail. But where it's physically stored is not in Megan's OneDrive. Instead, because this is a channel where in general we go to files at the top, we're going to see a folder called recordings. So here we go. We got recordings a minute ago by Megan. Now, if I drill into this, say it's a recurring meeting, like a lot of the meetings I attend in like the Microsoft world are, all of the recurrences will show up right there in a nice list. I can go to the date that I missed because it's like 2021, 8/27, and I can watch that now. I can even download it, stuff like that, because I'm a member of the team. This isn't really fair because I'm looking as Megan Bowen, but I can even do it as a guest. If I go in, this is John logged in as a guest. Because I'm a guest, like in the Microsoft tenant, I'm able to watch those recordings later on if they were channel-based because I'm a member of that channel. So I have access to those SharePoint files If I click on it here, boom, I can watch that even though I was a guest. I don't have to have somebody send it to me. Where this is getting like kind of deep, but if you go into a private scheduled meeting, I've got 3 people from Cerner and 2 clients, and I record the meeting. Everybody from Cerner who is in there in my org, it's going to be in my OneDrive, automatically share with those people. They can get to it. The external people who are scheduled in that meeting, by default, they don't get access to that recording. I've got to go send it to them. Now, it's less steps than it was with the Microsoft Stream situation because I don't have to download it from Stream, put it in OneDrive, then send it to them. I just send it to them because it's already in OneDrive. When it comes to a channel, though, because we're working together, they're a member of the team as a guest, they have access. I don't have to take that extra step of sending it to them. Unless you've done something in your organization to not give people access to the SharePoint if they're a guest.
And I mean, that's important to emphasize. So as we're rolling out the transition of these recordings from Stream into SharePoint and by extension OneDrive, part of that was because Stream did not support guest access. And so for us to record a meeting and make it available to guests, we had to download that from Stream, and then we had to upload it into a location that we could share from. So in the Microsoft world, it would be SharePoint or OneDrive, and then we could use the share option, and we could grant access to that video from there. So now the recordings are automatically, when a Teams meeting recording is going to automatically be stored in your SharePoint in the folder with the in a subfolder for the corresponding channel where you recorded that meeting, or if you're in a private meeting, it's going to be stored in the OneDrive folder inside of recordings. Couple of things to point out here. I do want to emphasize a pro tip, something that John just did that's actually really, really helpful. He went from the post tab here inside of the channel. He went from post where the meeting was, showed up as a thread. He went from there to the file tab, and from the file tab, he was actually able. We're gonna let this tab load.
I know, go away.
Yeah, so he went into the file tab, and this is subtle, but point this out to your users. You have full fidelity of this document library. You can go from the general channel, drill down into any folders that are there, but you can also go from the general channel and drill up to documents and go into other channels and other subfolders inside of there. But we're in the general channel in that recordings subfolder. So, full fidelity to move around in here. But each of these channels is going to have a recordings folder in it. So if you've got a lot of channels, remembering which folder that, which channel and which recording folder that it's in can be a little cumbersome. So just something to kind of point out with that. But this is where the recording is going to live. Now, extending off of that, a couple of nuances. So John went in and started this manually. He started the recording manually while the meeting was in progress. But now there's a new meeting option for you to automatically start a recording. So when the meeting is created, there in the meeting details screen, we can go into meeting options and we can actually set to auto record. So that's another nuance that you need to be aware of. So we're drilling down into it now.
Yeah, so we go in here, we can go to meeting options, and Megan wants to make sure she does not forget to press record on this planogram Q3. She can go into the meeting options, and then here at the bottom, dude, I got to get fiber, man. The Spectrum internet, killing me. All right, down here near the bottom, we have record automatically. So yeah, we're going to flip that on, Andy, and then hit save.
Now, the question is, what event causes this to trigger automatically? Is it the organizer? Is it a presenter? Is it an attendee? Is it a guest? And then when it's triggered, where is it actually stored? Fortunately for us, we're in a Teams meeting. We're inside of a channel. So when the meeting is recorded, it's going to store it in that recordings folder related to the channel. But who can actually trigger that recording? Anybody who starts the meeting. So if the organizer is the one that starts the meeting and hits that join button, recording starts automatically. If an attendee shows up 15 minutes early or a day early, and they join that meeting, it's going to record,
Mhm.
but because this is associated with a channel meeting, it's going to record into that channel recording folder. That's different on the OneDrive side of the house and private meeting side of the house. So in a private meeting, if an attendee were to jump into a meeting early and trigger the recording,
Mhm.
depending on whether that's an internal person or not, it could end up in an attendee's OneDrive account versus the organizer or the presenter. Microsoft is aware of this, and this is something I think
Mhm.
that they're working on addressing. But in a channel meeting, we don't have to worry about it as much because it's going to store it in the channel recording folder.
Yeah. So I was kind of showing the magic of that. Megan organized the meeting. So Megan went in to meeting options. She said record automatically. Then Alex, he went and joined the meeting. He's by himself. You saw that the banner automatically popped up that recording has started. Alex is going to leave, which is going to stop the recording. And then now we can go back again, go back into the channel. Megan missed the meeting, even though she's the organizer. And there's the planogram. The meeting recording started. The meeting recording stopped. It's saving to OneDrive. It's really saving to SharePoint. Don't worry about the wording. It's already right here. What's interesting though is it says recorded by Megan Bowen. So the organizer, even though she didn't press record, she is the owner of the file because she told it to record automatically. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Andy, because I don't use the record automatically. I want to say, yeah, see, this was modified by Alex. So Alex actually created the video file. I want to say in a private scheduled meeting, so just a normal meeting, you press record automatically, you tell it to record automatically. I think if someone from the same organization starts the meeting, it will start recording. It will be owned by that participant in their OneDrive, but the organizer will have full rights, edit, download to that meeting, right? To that recording.
Yeah, that's correct. So
Okay.
an attendee participant in the org could join in, start the,
Mm-hmm.
the meeting, and that would start the recording, but it'll automatically add the organizer with full edit rights to that
Okay.
recording.
Cool. Yeah. So even though it said recorded by Megan, Alex is the one that made the file. And this is where I was talking about, like, it's nice to know this recording folder exists, because you can see, like, this is one of those, the benefit of Microsoft Teams in general, why Teams is so awesome, is onboarding. You can create this channel structure, you can create these tabs, and now you can get somebody up and running on a team really fast. And one of those things is they don't lose that knowledge by starting, 3 months after the team was created. They can go back in time and see decisions that were made and meetings that happened in the past, and they can get caught up faster than having to, have the person virtually sit at your desk with you while you show them the ropes. They already have access to all the tabs. They already have access to the meetings that occurred before they started at the company.
Yep.
So it's really helpful to know where that is. Very cool.
And to your point, onboarding, super simple, because now, and that's one of the things we benefit from in a small team trying to manage a large set of users. We can bring somebody new into the team, and because the channel is active, the channel has that history there, it's easy for us to point to something. Hey, look at this, this, and this. This will get you up to speed on what's happening here. Or we got this reoccurring meeting coming up. Here's last week's meeting. And because it's a recording, you can watch it in double speed. You can turn on the captions and you can watch it from there, and you can get through this content pretty quickly. But beyond just like IT support, I mean, this is helpful across so many other departments. Like, people come and go in departments all the time. Now we have that recorded history. We build our business process around teams and channels like the tool was designed for, and people can onboard, get up to speed very quickly. And so something that might have taken 2 months for them to get up to speed, we might be able to narrow that down to just a few weeks.
Yeah, it's very worth it to, have that in mind and plan out the structure of your team, go through that work to think about, onboarding. So yeah, one of the things too with recordings, you mentioned the ability to play back at multiple speeds. That I was going to check that and see over here. I don't see it yet in this particular tenant, but that is something that's like imminent. You'll be able to do like half speed, 2 speed, 1.5 speed. I think, isn't it like anything from 0.5 speed to 2x? And I think there's like 1.25, 1.5, and 1.75. That is something that's coming to OneDrive based recordings.
And you can also download the video and play it on your player of choice.
True.
On your local computer. Whether it's QuickTime or VC or VLC player or whatever it is. Like you can speed it up. It'll play there with full fidelity based off of the recording.
Yeah. Another thing that's coming, Andy, is automatic expiration of
read my mind. Read my mind.
If the 13 viewers are ready to go even deeper into the nuances of recording, Microsoft has announced that, and I think rightfully so, Microsoft has announced that they're bringing automatic expiration to Teams recordings of 60 days because they found in internal research that basically, I mean, I know you're proud of your meeting. I know that it's the best meeting that was ever at your company. Nobody watches the meeting after 60 days. It's like 95+% never get watched past 60 days. So Microsoft's rolling out that change, but it's something to be aware of. How do we get around it, Andy?
So first, 99%, according to Microsoft statistics, 99% of Teams meeting recordings are never rewatched after 60 days. So they're introducing this policy that when it goes into effect, that Teams meeting recordings, TMRs, are going to be subject to a 60-day expiration policy, essentially. That means the video is going to be deleted after 60 days, which means video is going to be gone. So nuances around that. What are some of the things that that you can do? So first off, who does this impact? And we have a link to this article, this blog post, and this was updated on August 26th. So the day before we're doing this live stream, they made some updates there. I haven't even had a chance to read through the updates, so I'll have to go and do that in a minute. But so who does this affect? This affects your Teams meeting recordings for private, non-channel meetings, channel meetings, scheduled meetings, and ad hoc meetings. So anything that's going to be stored on the SharePoint side of the house or the OneDrive side of the house is going to be subject to this this automatic deletion and this retention policy. Now, Microsoft was kind enough to do an FAQ section down at the bottom. What is the change? Who does it impact? Why should I use this feature? And so there's a few things around that. Why should I use this feature? Just to point out, Microsoft notes that a typical meeting is around 400 megabytes per hour of recording. So those are some pretty large files. With the number of meetings that we attend weekly, like, we saw John's calendar a minute ago. It seems like every hour is pretty much blocked on there. And I see that on my calendar quite as well. Why should you use this? Limit some of the storage that's being consumed by your teammates in the organization. We have a lot of storage, but we don't have unlimited storage. In some cases, you're paying for that extra storage. So this is going to help you to start to clean up some of that. Why are they introducing the change? Well, as I just mentioned, 99% of these meetings on average are never watched again after 60 days. So then the question is, why is this turned on by default? They're turning this on by default because 99% of these meetings aren't watched after 60 days. And so it's going to automatically start to clean up some of that content. And let's face it, are end users going to clean up that content? No. In my experience, because these are digital files, they hoard everything. They want a copy of a copy of a copy. They want it local. They want it in the cloud. They want it in OneDrive. They want it in SharePoint. So by turning this on by default, we're removing some of that requirement and burden from the end user to clean it up. But we're also they're helping, I think, in some situations, some of the IT pros that are out there, so that they don't have to manually go back and deal with this. Now, that being said, as an IT pro, I want that control. My organization has our own separate policies. I'm going to talk about that in just a second. So one of the follow-up questions, will it be automatically deleted if it's accessed or if it's downloaded? There's some subtleties to that. So accessing the file does not change the expiration date. The file itself has like a flag that's set on it in the metadata associated with it. That's how the system knows to delete it. Viewing the file does not remove that flag. Copying that, moving that to another location does not remove the flag, because if you're familiar with the way that SharePoint metadata works, if we move something and metadata is active in both locations, the metadata travels with it with the move to command. So in this case, the flag's going to travel with the file. So you can move it from the recordings folder. It's still going to get deleted. You can access it and view it. It's still going to be deleted. But if you download it, that's on your local resources. You can do whatever you want with it. It's not going to be deleted. If you re-upload it,
rights management level of writing to the file, so it's not going to delete it off your computer if you downloaded it.
No.
Yeah.
So if you download it, you've got that copy there. If you put it in stream, it's going to live in stream, as long as stream is the current stream, and when the migration to the new stream happens, it should migrate over. If you upload it into a private file share or a private server or a private website, it's still going to work there. If you re-upload it into SharePoint or OneDrive, because you downloaded it, the flag is essentially removed. And so when you re-upload it, it's not going to be subject to the expiration. That also means if you use the copy to command. So like if I'm remembering correctly, if you use the copy to, it removes the flag. So you're creating a replica of that file in another location. Well, that replica is not going to have the expiration tagged on it, but the original would be subject to being deleted.
Yeah.
Now,
go
ahead.
I was thinking this is interesting. The fact that at 14 days, they're going to put a little icon next to the file to let you know that it's up next. It's going to be deleted. So it gives you the opportunity to download it, or as I think maybe you were going to say, to copy the file to another location. That would be my recommendation. Say that, typical meetings that you're recording it just for the benefit of, like those that couldn't make it to the meeting and they want to watch it after the fact. 60-day expiration is fine, for the vast majority, because it's like 60 days from now, that's probably not even relevant information anymore. But if this is something that like we're having this meeting to make a decision that we're going to look back on in time, or we're having this meeting as official knowledge transfer, an education session, yeah, I do want that to live more than 60 days. In that scenario, what I would do personally is I would create a repository for that, right? Either a separate SharePoint document library for all training, or even a folder in this channel that's like, this is KTs, knowledge transfers. If you copy the file to that other location, then it won't have that expiration flag. And then, you can have that as knowledge that lives on past that 60 days. But if you just move it, it's going to carry that expiration along with it.
Yeah, exactly. So that's just something to really keep in mind. The article goes on a few other details that are pretty important. How is the expiration date calculated? Well, it's the day of the meeting recording plus the default number of days set by the admin. Now that's curious language. So they're telling us that the date is 60 days, but they're also saying set by the admin. So this is starting to light up in tenants now. We have, there's a PowerShell script that we can run where we can go in and we can adjust the expiration policy on top of that. So there is an admin control, but it's strictly through PowerShell right now. We're able to access it in a couple of the tenants that I work in. But the big concern that we have is if we set it to, let's say 60 days isn't long enough for us. If we set this to 90 days or 180 days, this expiration policy is set to go in place in September. So the question that we had for Microsoft around this was basically, if we set this at 180 days and this policy goes in place, is that going to override what we've set to 180 days because we have access to this expiration date now? And the answer that we were told specifically was no. If you set it to 180, when the policy goes in place, it will respect the 180 because that's what you chose at the tenant level for your organization. So as an IT pro, I can make that that change to it. And then, kind of drilling down even further, can the expiration date be changed for each Teams meeting recording? Have some that are 30 days, and then have some that are going to be a little bit longer with that. So they're saying in the article here that the users can go through the detail pane for a selected file and that they can adjust it. I haven't actually seen that live yet. So I'm not sure about that. But if an admin sets a policy on it, the user should not be able to set it longer than the administrative policy. It should be shorter than the administrative policy. Kind of like with guest sharing, like the organization might have a 60-day setting on a link, but you as a person sending something out, I can shorten that to 30 days, but I can't send it or I can't set it longer than the organization policy. So continuing down that, so how can we set that policy? The commandlet's actually listed right there, the PowerShell commandlet. And the neat thing about that is that it looks like we're able to set it based off of the meeting policy. So this one here is representing the global meeting policy. So it looks like you can have some for the global meeting policy and then some additional meeting policies that you might support in your admin center. And then there's like the maximum value and the minimum value that you can set. So if you wanted to set it to 273 years, you can do that. If SharePoint's still a thing in 273 years, like I'm going to be like really amazed by that. On Skynet.
Yeah, they were talking like E5's expensive. Could you imagine paying for E5 for 273 years?
And then the minimum value is basically you can set it to never to -1 to never expire. So yeah, you do have some control over that. Now I'm seeing some comments here, and you were posting those in the chat window. We're excited for the meeting retention policy. Users don't delete squat on their own, and 60 days is long enough if you really think about it. Especially how fast things like Teams and some of this technology changes. And I totally agree with that. But there's times that like we record a meeting for like an EVP or something, and there's a whole lot of legal associated with that, and there's big policies being discussed, and there's retention around that, especially in the healthcare industry, where we have to keep a record of that for n number of years. Like it's a legal requirement for us. So there's that consideration. So you might have some different policies that you use here. Now, what we're talking about here is expiration based off of Teams meeting recordings. But there's another way that we can handle this, and that's through your Security and Compliance Center working with retention and labels. If you put a retention policy in the Security and Compliance Center, that will trump what you have here with the expiration policy. So if you have a retention label set on Teams meeting recordings from compliance, and you say it has to be kept for 180 days for whatever our compliance rules are, then it will keep it based off of that. So compliance will override the expiration that's set here, even through the Teams meeting policies scripting.
And also, because this is a CS Teams meeting policy, you can give different people different policies, So like if EVPs or something like that, you need to give them a little bit more time, or you want to give them a little bit more time than normal people. You can scope policies to different people. And that's the whole reasoning behind like that architecture of having policies and assignments of policies is you can have global, but you can have like, hey, these people are in some other group, so they need theirs to last 180 days instead of 60. You do have that flexibility.
And there's a couple other capabilities that they're turning on with that. The article also references blocking or allowing downloading of channel meetings. So like if you want to keep the channel meeting in the channel, prevent people from downloading it, there's a policy around that you can activate to block that. There's one around the transcription So if you want to prevent a transcript of that, you can do it. You can turn on or off cloud recording.
Yeah.
The article, we link to it in the chat menu. I'm sure we'll put it in the recording notes as well. It provides all the PowerShell that you need for those 3 settings.
Yep. Yeah, it's up a little bit. Yeah, there's these nice PowerShell things. It's nice too that you got, just a copy button right there every time you see a code block. So This is a super long article. It's a good one to go through, especially before this hits your tenant if you're an admin out there.
This has been updated 3 times in the last 3 weeks. So they're updating this one about once a week as they're working through some of this. So this might not have hit your tenant yet, but this is something that you're going to need to consider with the automatic expiration of these meeting recordings.
Yeah. Cool.
And I'm just glancing through to make sure we covered everything.
Yeah, I was going to say, what else we got on our notes here? We're talking about...
So guest access, we covered a little bit of that, but there's a couple of things related to guests that are, I think, important that we need to provide a distinction on. So we've gone through, like, how do you start one ad hoc? How do you schedule one? There's people getting it to their calendar. There's the recordings associated with that. So a couple things. From the guest point of view, I think we need to go back and just cover a little bit more in depth. So you did the demo a moment ago where you scheduled one of these and you added, you got a guest that's associated with it. So the clear distinction we need to make is that a guest of the meeting or was that a guest of the team? Because those are 2 separate experiences that you need to consider when you create one of these. So
this particular one, all the demos I've been doing, these are a guest of the team. So like they've got access to that SharePoint file structure. They can go into the Teams app and browse throughout the channels, But yeah, it's different if you're just adding the person to the required field and they're not a guest in that tenant. They're just, a customer or something like that.
Yeah, so you send an invite to me. And you see, I actually just responded there because I'm a guest of the team. To your point, I have access to the retail team, the general channel, and I can see the NC 460 sales. So I can see the sales channel as well. I can see the meeting, and I can respond, and I can actually interact with that because I'm a guest of the team. But if I'm not a guest of the team, if I'm just a guest of the meeting, I'm going to be really limited in what I can actually do. And so one of the big things is if I'm just a guest of the meeting, when the meeting's in progress, that's going to limit my ability to use the chat. Like I can see things that are actually happening while the meeting is in progress, but my ability to chat and respond is not going to be present inside of there. That also means that when that meeting is over, I'm not going to be able to go back and view the meeting recording. I'm not going to have access to that anymore. So, being a member of the team grants me access to the history of the meeting, the conversation, the ability to get to the recording after the fact. But if you only invite me to the meeting as a guest, then I don't have access to it after the fact and I get kicked out or, when the meeting's over and then that's it. So I no longer have access to that.
That's a good point I forgot to mention is chat. Getting into the chat, seeing the chat during the meeting, that can be a little bit of a tricky situation for people who are guests in a tenant. So you invited somebody as a guest to your meeting, but they're not in the team. So they're not a member of the team. They're just in the invite list. Because this team or because this meeting was scheduled out of a channel, the chat lives within the channel, kind of like the recording lives within the SharePoint. That means that whenever a guest joins and say that I'm logged into Cerner and I'm joining a Contoso channel-based meeting, I'm actually not even going to see the chat icon to be able to chat with those folks. Now, that's how it works if they're just invited as a required attendee, off the cuff, they're not a member of the team. If they're a member of the team, they can get to the chat if they have switched their team's client to that tenant. So Contoso invites a Cerner associate. That Cerner associate, whenever I go to join like a Microsoft hosted meeting from my calendar, it comes up saying, hey, this is scheduled in another tenant. Do you want to switch or don't switch now? If I hit switch, it's going to have to switch the tenant to the one I'm a guest in and then join the meeting. I will see the chat because I can access that channel. If I choose not to switch from my home tenant, then just like I wasn't a member of the team, I wouldn't be able to see the chat bubble. So what I do personally, whenever say I've got a Microsoft hosted meeting and I'm joining from Cerner, I kind of want I don't really like switching tenants personally in my app. So I don't. What I'll do is I'll join the meeting from my Teams app and I'll say, don't switch. And then I don't have the chat. What I do, just feels crazy to say this is what I do, but it works for me, is I open up Edge and I'll open up Teams to the Microsoft tenant and I'll monitor the chat from that. So I've got like two separate things. So I don't lose my home tenant's chats and I can use all the great features of the meeting window itself. I just use that one functionality of chat over in the channel using a browser. That might be over the top for what normal people do, but that's just the way that I get around it. Is like now I can do reactions, I can do all the cool stuff, and I can just access the chat over on another screen because I have multiple monitors. So
that is an
that's definitely a nuance.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to approach that.
Do you switch tenants when you
tenant
join?
Switching is the bane of my existence, and yes, I do switch tenants. So I have my one main email that I use for most of my work, and so I have that connected to majority of the tenants that I need to get to, so I can switch within the app fairly quickly. But I do have some clients where I have standalone logins, and so I have to log out and log back in, and that is the bane of my existence because I'm delivering. Like we're here, we're doing a live stream. Like I'm connected to this service as me. Well, like when I do client work, I try to provide that same level of quality, with the video and things like that. So the Teams desktop app gives me the best experience for that. So I'm constantly switching between tenants, and just like everyone else out there who switches between tenants, I feel your pain on tenant switching. I've accidentally joined meetings from another tenant, and it limits what you can do, and then going back and tracking which meeting that you were in, it's really difficult to like if you're trying to track billable hours, for instance. If I accidentally I click on a invite from my Outlook and I'm in the wrong tenant in Teams, when it connects in, I have to go back and track down like which tenant did I join from, and do I have chat available, and so doing what you're doing, where you just join the meeting and then you chat from Edge and use different profiles, that's actually a clever way to handle that. What I don't like is when I have the Teams desktop app open, and then for some reason I maybe have the Teams web browser app open, and I'm in the meeting and I'm participating, and the web browser app's going crazy, sending me notifications. Hey, here's a reply. Here's a reply. I have to go and mute the conversation, and my phone's going crazy because I'm in that meeting, and I'm getting notifications. That's the one I don't like. I'm in the meeting. Stop sending me notifications on all my other devices. I'm in the meeting. Like,
or heaven forbid that I don't join a meeting. MVP meetings are the worst about this. MVPs are very social people and we're community focused and all this and that. But my goodness, if you join an MVP meeting, you see the chat is wild. It is like just tons of chats. Everybody's like, hey from Germany. But if you don't join it because you like got a conflict, my Lord, you're going to get like, especially at the end, you're going to get like 85 chats from every MVP in there that's like, thanks, great content, thanks so much, have a good night.
Yeah, there's your pro tip.
My
when you
phone
exit the meeting, mute.
That sucker, my phone overheats if it's like office apps and services and there's like 200 people saying like, hey from where they are. I love it. I like to see all the the names of people that I love to talk to and that I miss seeing in person. But MVPs are chatty, man.
Yeah, and that's another reason why we've had to learn channel meetings, because most of a lot of the MVP stuff actually goes through channel meetings. So you learn quickly some of the nuances there. But when you start applying it to a business process, like bringing it internal to an organization, some of the things that we've talked about here are definitely nuances that users need to be aware of. Like if I am delivering a channel meeting and I'm a healthcare entity and I've got a recent merger or acquisition that are not fully part of my tenant yet, and they need to participate in this meeting. If I send them just a guest link to the meeting, that limits what they can do inside of that meeting, the way that they interact with me, versus if I add them as a guest to the channel, then, they get some more of those capabilities. And, then there's also like, they probably have their own Office 365 Microsoft environment, and then they're logged in over there, and do they need to switch tenants to get into it? And like we deal with this as IT pros all the time, and we're well versed in it, but the average end user, that's another step in the process of getting them to the information that they need. So what I recommend to those users, if you're just attending a meeting, use your web browser and use different profiles, like John was mentioning. In Edge, you can create multiple profiles. You can create one for your primary, and you can create one for secondary. You can turn on syncing, so you can easily sync across these profiles if you log in from different computers. And when you log in, you just log in with the organization's credentials, and then you get the team's experience. And it's pretty close to the desktop. It's not 100%, but if you're just an attendee, does it matter if you have all the features? If you're a presenter, sometimes it's a little more. The desktop's a little more presenter friendly. There's some more power there, but use profiles, and that'll definitely help as you're going across those various organizations, and you'll minimize your tenant switching.
Yeah, that's kind of the way I live. That's what I figured out. Like, I don't know, 2 years ago, where it's like I've got a foot in both camps all the time. So I pretty much just live in a web browser for my non-employer. Anything I'm a guest in, I pinned the tab. This is like a really helpful Edge tip, is you can pin tabs. So I pin the Microsoft tenant Teams environment, and then I just live in Teams with my Cerner work. That's number one priority. The guest stuff is always like secondary to that, so I choose to use the browser for the secondary. And it's nice because I don't feel like I miss anything throughout the day, because I got those browser notifications, but I've also got Teams app notifications for all my colleagues there. So it works. There's minor complaints about like, oh crap, I forgot. Yeah, I can't get to the chat because this is channel based. But once you know that, it's not a huge deal. I'm like, okay, I open up the browser and then I can get to the chat, and it doesn't ruin my day or anything. So,
and that leads to one other thing I wanted to mention, notifications. So like we talked a little bit about what happens when I'm a guest and I try to participate in a Teams meeting, limiting the chat. We also talked about like scheduling. So scheduling meetings, making sure that they show up on the calendar. You showed the trick going in, viewing the meeting details, add to my calendar. Well, one of the other things I think it's really important is the notifications around it. Teams sends out a lot of notifications by default. And as a user, you can control those notifications. You can get an email summary. You can, get that information right away. And then you can also put custom notifications. So like within a channel, you can choose the level of notifications that you want. So you can customize it inside of there. So as a user, you have control. So if there's certain things in the channel that you want to make sure that you get a desktop notification on, a banner, whether you want to see it in the activity feed in Teams or you want to receive an email, you have some control over that. So within the channel settings, like John's showing you here, you can choose the settings there, but you can also go to the individual message. So if we create a reoccurring meeting in the channel, you can go to the individual message inside of there, and you can adjust the settings or the notifications for that as well. So up in the top right-hand corner, notifications, you can turn them on or off.
Turn off notifications.
Yeah. So like if there's a reoccurring meeting, it doesn't really apply to you, and there's a lot going on there. you can turn it off, and so you can minimize that. The thing that I turn off a lot of notifications because I've been in Teams already. I rely we look on the Teams panel on the left hand side. A lot of things are in bold. You see some icons popping up. I rely on that a lot. I turn off email for the most part. I turn off desktop notifications for the most part. There's a couple of I'll have Teams open in a web browser in another profile. I'll have the desktop notifications there in case like a client or something needs to get a hold of me while I'm doing other work. So I can just kind of keep track of what's happening. But a lot of times I'll turn off a lot of the notifications, but if something's important to you, you can turn on notifications for that in Teams. And that's just another way to kind of keep informed. But that's an end user going and doing that and keeping track of that.
Yeah. Cool. I don't think I have anything else about channel-based meetings personally. We did get a question about OBS Studio and like video feeds and stuff. If we want to talk about that for a little bit before we jet.
Yeah, okay. No problem talking about that. I love geeking out over video.
Yeah, this was way earlier, but living with lists. Well, no, not that one. This one. He was like, what do you use to stream your video feeds and screen? I'm curious if he means like right now in this environment or during meetings. I'll answer both for myself. For this, we are using something called Restream Studio. And it's really cool. I don't know if I'll be able to show it without it doing a weird house of mirrors. But this is what it looks like from my perspective. So I'm able to change the layout of the screen right here, and I'm able to see everybody's chats along the side and choose to show them on screen or not. So it's kind of a cool little control board.
All web-based.
Whenever I minimize it, it's all web-based. I can rearrange, put myself on top, put Andy on top. So typically like I do a lot of OBS Studio, but for this one, we were like, let's try Restream so we get, some experience using that platform. And I really like it. I've been impressed with it. In
the video quality, the video quality that Restream's given us is it's given us 720p at 30 frames per second coming from local, and it's pulling like full audio as well. And because it's all running cloud, no local resources are being consumed. Now, like my fan's going crazy because I've got a whole bunch of screens being shared and streaming in, but like as far as like the online quality, I'm monitoring on my iPad off to the side. There's a little bit of a delay. It's not long at all. It's just a couple of seconds, and like I haven't seen a hiccup at all. Yeah.
I like that the chat's integrated. If I start paying for it, so we're doing this actually for free. I'm looking at getting like the pro level, because then that would allow us to like turn off the Restream logo that you see. This side right here. Dude, I got really confused. I'll be able to turn that off, and like do my own backgrounds and things like that. But out of the box, it's pretty awesome by itself. I'm going to Twitter and to YouTube at the same time, and you can add more channels and stuff. When it comes to Teams meetings and like what do you use in a Teams meeting, a lot of people are doing OBS, so they can add like their lower thirds, and they can do like cool layouts and stuff. They'll do like a virtual camera from OBS into Teams meetings. And I've tried that. I've done that. I've done the ATEM Mini, so that I can like put myself on top of my screen and do picture in picture, all using a camera source. But personally, I've gone away from all of that, and I just use Teams with my camera. I select my camera's coming in over an Elgato Cam Link 4K. So I select that as my webcam. I select this as my microphone, my headphones as my audio output source. And I just use Teams as vanilla as that. The big reason for me is because I can't force 16:9 aspect ratio. So I don't do any other graphics on my in my frame because I can't control how I'm cropped on the other person's side, and I don't want my graphic like cut off, and that kind of kills like the magic. Now if Teams added 16:9 like Zoom has, if they add that, I would probably do OBS virtual camera because then I'd do like cool graphics and stuff, but I don't want it cut off because then it kind of cheapens it. What do you do, Andy? Are you doing virtual cameras?
So I too am a big OBS fan, and for the beginning of COVID, when we started Teams everything, I was using OBS to create an overlay, me on top of the content, so I'm in the lower corner and I can move myself back and forth. I'm on a Mac, and Microsoft made an update to Teams last year, and it killed my ability to use virtual cams inside of Teams for the better part of 2020. So I just had to resort to a camera and then taking advantage of the Teams capabilities. But when you use a virtual cam with Teams, unless you spotlight yourself, if it goes into the gallery view, it crops in. And so you don't have control, as John was saying, it'll crop in. I didn't realize this until recently. When it crops in as an end user, you can click on that picture and you can drag left or right, and you can center the person.
Yeah, I've seen that too.
Yeah, that's pretty neat. But when you use a virtual cam and you're using like an OBS and you've got all these different things happening, it's cropping in if you're in the gallery mode. So you might not even be able to see all that other stuff. So I figured out last year that with OBS, you can output a projector screen. So you just right click on the main image, output a projector, and you can make it full screen. And then when you go to share from Teams, from the share tray, choose the projector window, and then you're sharing a full resolution window, but you've got a whole other window running on your computer. So like that could be some resources being consumed locally.
That's what our buddy Tomislav, that we know through Twitter, he does that. I think he was the one that told me about the projector in OBS as a window, and I didn't even know about that. I'd never done projectors, and I'd never done like what do they call it? Yeah, multi-view
studio.
But yeah, he told me that about a year ago, and I was like, oh yeah, you could do a projector and then share it as a screen, and that works, and it won't crop. But yeah, it's all kind of complicated, and it's like there's a risk of failure. And from my perspective, being like the Teams architect at Cerner, I feel like it's on me. I'm not the most attractive person in it, but I better be the best looking quality wise, because early on when we switched to Teams before the pandemic started, and there was a little bit of like cantankerousness about like, Teams isn't as good as WebEx and the quality, and, people complaining about this and that just because it was different. So I took it upon myself. Like, that's why I bought all this crap, honestly, over the course of years, is I want to prove that it is not Teams quality is bad or whatever people were saying. It was any conferencing solution is as good as the quality you put into it. So I've invested in a camera, I've invested in a nice microphone. But on the flip side of that, I also want it to be as like reliable as possible, so that it's not like everybody kind of just starts blaming Teams, whenever something goes wrong, and not my ridiculously complicated OBS studio that I'm running on like a MacBook Air from 2015. It's like, well, maybe it's not just Teams, maybe it's the other stupid stuff you're doing. So I kind of like cut all that stuff out. I try to keep it simple, and then that way I use the Teams features as they are instead of trying to like work around them. But yeah, if they locked in 16:9, I would do that.
Well, some of the workarounds that we're doing, like we're adding to the complexity of the workflow. If it fails, that looks bad on the product. But I don't have the ability to share and restream. Can you turn that on for me, and I'll show my screen, and I'll show this real quick.
Yeah, if you hit the share button at the bottom of your window, you should be able to share it.
There it goes. All right. So
yeah, I'll see it pop up here in a second.
Actually, I'm just going to do the whole screen. Let's do screen one.
There it is.
All right. So I want to point this out. This is actually brand new, just went to preview, and it's pretty quickly hitting attendance worldwide. When you go in to share content now, when you share a screen or a window, but not a PowerPoint, a screen or a window, you get the new presenter modes, and these are built in to Teams now. And so I'm going to show you what it looks like. So the default is just share my content. I'm gonna share this screen, this window. Go ahead and broadcast that. So I'm gonna share on top of Teams. So this is what you see. This is essentially what the end user is actually seeing. But now with those new presenter modes, you can toggle over and you can go into a different view. So you can switch into let me turn on
the reporter view.
Yeah. All right. So you can go to the reporter view, and the end user actually sees this. And so Teams is handling all of that. So now that's the
now you don't need
view.
OBS for that chroma key effect.
It's built right in. There's the side by side or side by content. So I'm not sure exactly what term they're using for that.
I think it is side by side, isn't it?
And then
if you hover over for a second,
side by side.
And then
this is the reporter view. And so it kind of brings you on top of that content.
Oh yeah, the other one's called standout.
Gosh, standout.
Okay, so this is a pet peeve of mine. That's not a reporter. That's an anchor. An anchor sits at a desk with content over there. The reporter is in the field.
Yep.
I don't like the reporter name.
And you can see it does an okay job of cropping. I'm wearing headphones, so it's a little it's having some gaps there. If you have a solid background, a green screen, it definitely does a much better job.
Yeah.
But in these views, you do have the ability to control some of the background effects. So you can change when you go into it. Let me exit out of that and let me stop sharing. So when you go back and you want to go into it, so you can choose to start. Again, I just want to emphasize it only works with these options currently. Yeah. But you can choose the kind of the presenter mode that you want, and then if you're going to do something like a side by side view, you can customize the background. So you can pick one of these backgrounds. There's no option to add our own currently, and I haven't tried to get into the folder where this is to see if I can add one like we used to do before background effects became the norm in Teams. But you can pick one of the background effects, and then you can toggle into that view and you can share. That's built into Teams now. No OBS needed for that. Now, it does consume extra Teams resources, and just to put that into effect, if you're going to do something like that, you have in your Teams settings, it's going to use GPU, your graphics card, hardware acceleration. So that helps to offset some of the load on the CPU. That's definitely good to do. Don't disable that. Leave that on. Leave that unchecked. Use the hardware acceleration.
If you have a discrete graphics card. Yeah.
So
the bummer for me with that is that it doesn't record that presenter mode. That's another thing to keep in mind if you guys haven't tried it before. Is that side by side? We were excited internally at my company because we're like, we've got this challenge, right? How do we record? We've got a big health conference coming up. How do we pre-record all of our sessions? We want to be side by side. I want to do that awesome, side by side view with a cool, Cernerized background. And we set it up and then hit record to test it. And it's plain Teams recording with a black background and you're in the ribbon. It's oh my gosh, Microsoft, you got 80% of the way there. You got so close, but then you didn't do the one thing that at least my stakeholders are just ripping me about. So now I'm currently teaching a bunch of our events folks how to use OBS, and they're not technical at all. Teaching them OBS so that they can, try to record these in front of clients. And, there's risk of that not working out. And then you kind of are embarrassed in front of a stakeholder. It's Microsoft, if you had just recorded the presenter view, then I wouldn't have to teach people how to use OBS for this. So that's just another gripe. So
yeah, it's hard to get the quality of video that we need with the recording quality that we need without bringing in another tool
and just recording locally
to the workflow. Yeah. I know Teams supports NDI, where we can get an NDI output of each of the people that are present.
That's what we're doing with the recording OBS setup.
Yeah. But
Teams NDI.
And
Yeah.
then you got to output that to something, and then capture it and run from there.
Mhm.
And these are things that we're kind of working through with some of that.
Yeah.
So
One question that just came in was like, why not use Teams events for that particular use case? That's what we did last year. So last year we did all of those sessions were Teams live events, but there was no attendees, right? We just met with the stakeholder and recorded it locally. The challenge was the guest access. So it's gotten better over the past year, but a year ago, you had to add them to a team, then you had to invite them, then they had to download the Teams app, they had to switch the tenant to the right tenant, then join as a presenter. And these were all external people. So there was it was like really, really ugly trying to get that working. It's gotten better over the past year, but that team is so gun shy about it that they were like, we just anything will be better than Teams live events, please. So we're trying OBS this time. That way it's just a Teams meeting that the person's joining. But yeah, we did try Teams events, you know. So yeah, Chris says we found yesterday that it doesn't record in the PowerPoint live. So yeah, I've noticed that too, Chris. Like, if you have an embedded video in PowerPoint on a slide and you go to hit play, that won't be in the recording. It's just it's this weird, awkward silence where everybody's like looking at this, frame, this thumbnail on the PowerPoint, and it was playing, but it's just not in the recording.
Whiteboard
So,
doesn't record either. So if you go into a whiteboard session
yeah,
inside of the Teams
it's
meeting,
just,
it doesn't record the
yeah,
whiteboard.
Microsoft they got to get that going,
Well, the
got to make
workaround
it an
for
equitable experience for the
yeah.
people who couldn't attend live.
Well, the workaround for both of those is switch to local resources. So if you switch to Whiteboard on your iPad, and you feed that
Yeah,
into
you
the
screen
meeting,
share it.
or you play the video
Mhm.
local, and you make sure you have system audio captured, you
Yeah.
can get both. But you have to know when to do that in the presentation. And like, I love PowerPoint Live. I think it's great. No, it doesn't consume local resources. It's in the cloud for everybody. I think it's great,
Mhm.
but we're building up to maybe that full
Yeah.
functionality that we need.
Like
But the
we're
recording
getting
thing,
there. It's just I use
yeah,
the features as they come out, so I'm more than often
yeah,
disappointed because I'm using the minimum viable product, and like it's like it's got to get better. It's got to get better, and it's kind of funny because like they feel like a big gap when you've been waiting so long for this feature, and they do eventually get better. Like breakout rooms, they came out in December. They're getting better next month with like the delegated access and the pre-creation, but it's like now you use that feature for so long that it's not as exciting when it gets better. So
yeah.
that's just a side effect, I guess, of us like being on the bleeding edge. It's like, oh my gosh, PowerPoint Live. I'm the same. I use PowerPoint Live every single time I share a PowerPoint. But yeah, it's like that one thing here, that one thing over here, and it's going to get better. It always does. But the challenge for Microsoft is by the time that gets better, I'm already complaining about the other thing that's now at the minimum viable product. It's like, yeah, you're going to fix PowerPoint Live eventually, but I'm going to be talking about I'm going to be excited about the other thing that's 80% done. So
we
you can't please people like us.
we have a joke that runs within some of the teams that I work with in my work local user group. That feature is
Mm-hmm.
coming in the fall. They just didn't tell us which year.
Yeah. Yeah,
So it's coming in the
I'm
fall.
made a liar all the time. I always tell people the dates off the roadmap, and I'm always turned into a liar when it gets moved out. But that's the nature of this.
Yeah.
Uh, fix bring it out fast, break it fast, fix it fast. That's the benefit, but it's also the thing that makes it a challenge for us to stay up to date. It gives us something to talk about, something to do.
I set up
So
a demo user, and my rule of thumb is if that demo user has it, I'll start talking
mhm.
about it and start broadcasting it and doing training around it. But until that demo
Yeah.
user has it, I'll work on it privately so that I know what the capabilities are and the limitations, and I'll test it out.
Mm-hmm.
And then when the demo user gets it, we'll
So
go
I'm
live
always
with it.
excited when
Yeah.
my Contoso tenant has it. I know everybody has it. I know that is completely outside of NDA. That's only
Yeah.
R4. So when Megan Bowen can do it, then I can make a video on it and I get excited. So.
And then I have a separate, so there's the many different rings. You're more internal with some of those than I am, but I have a separate user set up for private preview. That's public private preview. And I know typically when something hits public private preview, we can go ahead and talk about it, and I can start building training around it because it's pretty close to GA. And like the presenter modes presenter modes that we just looked at. Those hit private preview about 3 weeks ago, and now I've seen them GA across all of my
Megan's
tenants
in public preview, and then all my other like Alex and Miriam and all them, they're not public preview.
And like I've got my personal account set up on targeted release, first release, whatever we're calling it this week, and then I've got a separate one on the private preview, and then I've got a demo user, which is just standard release. I know I can go and do demos there and always be safe. And I have a separate tenant where there's nothing first release. It's just like, this is what you get. This is what it is today. This is what we're going to train on. We run off of that. Yeah, keeping up with all that's really hard.
It is.
That's what we do.
It's fun, but it's also a lot of work. Yeah. This was a lot of fun, man. I like taking these topics and just like wringing out as much as we possibly can out of it, and learning something in the process, finding shortcomings, thinking of like creative uses and use cases where this might fit or might not fit. That's a little bit different than just like reporting the news. I consume a ton of Office 365 news. I love the live streams that are about, what's coming in the message center, what's newly released on the roadmap. So I hope everybody who's watching it, hopefully you like these like deep dives. Let's click all the buttons and see what it does after it's already here. And, maybe that fills out a little bit of a gap out there. After it's news, you get it in your hands. Like, now what? Hopefully we explain a little bit of like just everything about it so that you go into things a little bit more informed. Let us know in the comments if you're watching this later on or if you're watching this live now. Let us know what other things do you want us to deep dive about. Andy and I, we've been talking about breakout rooms. When the breakout room features come next month, I want to talk about those. And like, it's not MVP anymore. It's not minimum viable product. It's now going to have a few improvements over the past year. So let's deep dive on it. Let's go into like, okay, now is it time to use breakout rooms? Maybe you've been holding off. Some other things, Andy, what other topics have we thought of? The presenter mode, we talked about that. We've gone deep into webinars.
Everything or a deep dive into video, I think, is something that's kind
of the new
top
stream
of mind.
portal comes out. That'll be great to talk about.
A little bit more into the recordings, the video quality. We're seeing a lot of questions around that. Some of the nuances of fit to screen versus spotlight versus when we share a virtual webcam versus let me share a projector or a window system audio with that. So I think there's probably there's a good deep dive with all things Teams video. I think that we could put out there. It seems like this audience is keen for something like that. That would be a lot of fun. And then
with video we could talk about audio too in that one, because like you and I were talking right before we went live about we're looking for ways to pipe like sound effects into our meeting. Teaching a class, you can add sound to make it more engaging that way. Like, we could talk about some of those advanced things. Yeah, like that. I just got to buy the software. I want to do that so bad. I want to have crickets and stuff like that. So, yep. Yeah, the quality of that sounds really good coming through your Rode Connect.
Yeah, that's free software. You just have to have the mic for it.
The right microphone.
Yeah. So
one of them we could talk about like our lab setups if we want, or our desk setups. Just whatever you guys think you want to hear about. Yeah, if you want to know about our office setups or specific features in Teams, let us know and we'll keep doing these. Just throw a comment.
I did SharePoint Fest in Chicago a few weeks ago. First time in-person conference in 19 months. Was going to
Yeah,
do PC,
was that
but it's been
weird
postponed.
seeing faces again?
It was weird being around people.
Yeah.
But I had a contractual commitment and I had to deliver
Hmm.
9 webinars while I was there. And so
Wow.
I tried to, I brought my live stream setup with me. I put it in a
Yeah.
messenger bag and brought it with me. My 80 Mini, my camera, my microphone, a secondary USB-C monitor, had it all set up, all with me. Tried to broadcast from the hotel room and the Wi-Fi was horrible. Yeah. So I had to pivot and use the conference podcast center for the remaining webinars that I did. So I had the whole setup there, and I was delivering it. A couple of my colleagues in the MVP community saw it and they asked me some questions about it and they asked me to participate in a podcast with them. So I did the podcast from the pod center right after I did a whole bunch of webinars, and then we talked about it and geeked out on it for a little while. So that is one I would love to talk about. I can talk about
gear and
my portable live stream setup, but also the actual home recording setup that I use. And I know yours is pretty robust as well. I mean, that's something, if people want to see us geek out on that, I'm happy to do that. That's fun. Yeah. It's like, how do we set this up and do this? So hopefully it's semi, amateurish professional. Hopefully we're getting, prosumer somewhere in there.
Yeah. Improvements every time.
Yeah.
Cool, man. Well, yeah, let us know. This was a lot of fun, dude. I think I'm about ready to eat some lunch and just finish out the rest of the day.
Yeah. So, thanks everybody for being here. Those of you that stuck with us the whole time, and let us know what you want to see coming up. I know I'm keen to do some more of these. This is a lot of fun on Fridays. So yeah, let us know. Yeah. Thanks everybody for hanging out. We'll talk to you later. Bye.